Commander Jake Morrison stood at the wide window of the UES Horizons Bridge, watching the massive structure grow larger as they approached. The Galactic Council Station was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stretched across 50 kilometers of empty space, its metal surface gleaming like silver under the light of nearby stars. Thousands of lights blinked across its surface, and ships of strange designs moved in and out of docking bays like busy insects. "Sir, we're receiving final approach instructions," said Lieutenant Karen Walsh from her position at the communications console. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Jake understood completely. They were about to make history as the first humans to meet with the Galactic Council. Jake nodded and turned to face his crew. "All stations, prepare for docking. This is what we came here for." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing the translation protocols one more time. The alien message that had brought them here had been clear enough, but she worried about misunderstandings. First contact was too important to get wrong because of a language barrier. "The translation software is running perfectly," she said. "Their basic trade language seems simple enough for our computers to handle." Captain Alex Turner, Jake's second in command, was busy coordinating with the station's docking control. The alien voices on the radio sounded different from any human. Language, full of clicks and musical tones that their computers turned into words. "They're assigning us Docking Bay 7, Alex reported. "They want us to use shuttlecraft instead of bringing the whole ship in." Jake thought that made sense. The Horizon was a large ship by human standards, but it was still tiny compared to the massive station ahead of them. As they got closer, he could see that some of the other ships docked there were much larger than anything humanity had built. "Jake," Dr. Carter said quietly, "have you noticed how few ships are moving around the station?" Jake looked out the window. Again, she was right. For such a huge station, there wasn't much traffic. Most of the ships he could see seemed to be leaving rather than arriving. The docking bays looked mostly empty. "Maybe they cleared the area for our arrival," Alex suggested. First contact is probably a big deal for them too. Jake wasn't sure about that. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The aliens had been polite in their messages, but there was something formal about their language that didn't feel welcoming. Ambassador Helen Brooks joined them on the bridge. She was Earth's first interstellar diplomat chosen for this mission. Because of her experience with difficult negotiations, she had spent months preparing for this moment, learning everything they knew about the Council and practicing her opening speech. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked her. Helen smiled, but he could see the tension in her eyes. "As ready as anyone can be for something that's never happened before." The shuttle ride to the station took 20 minutes. Jake, Helen, Dr. Carter, and 2 security officers made the trip, leaving Alex in command of the Horizon. As they approached the docking bay, Jake could see alien figures waiting for them through the shuttle's windows. "Remember," Helen said as they prepared to dock, "we're here to learn and to make friends. Earth is counting on us to make a good impression." The docking bay was huge, easily large enough to hold a dozen shuttles the size of theirs. The air inside was breathable for humans, which their hosts had arranged specially for this meeting. As the shuttle door opened, Jake got his first look at real aliens. The welcoming committee was impressive. There were at least 20 different types of beings, from small creatures that looked like walking plants to tall, thin beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. Some had too many arms, others had no arms at all. Some had faces that humans could understand, others looked like nothing Jake had ever imagined. At the front of the group stood a tall, crystalline being that sparkled under the bay's lights. When it spoke, its voice was like music, but the translation came through their earpieces in clear English. "Welcome, representatives of humanity. I am Zethkri, speaker for the Outer Rim Council. We have been waiting for your arrival." Helen stepped forward and bowed slightly, the way they had practiced. "Thank you for inviting us, Speaker Zethkri. I am Ambassador Helen Brooks, representing Earth and all of humanity. We are honored to be here." The crystal being's response was polite but formal. "The Council is eager to meet with your species. You have traveled far to reach us. As they were led through the station's corridors, Jake noticed that the aliens seemed to be studying them very carefully. It wasn't just curiosity about a new species. The way they looked at the humans reminded Jake of the way soldiers might study a dangerous animal at a zoo. Dr. Carter was fascinated by everything she saw. The station's technology was clearly far ahead of anything humanity had developed. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living material that glowed softly and changed color as they passed. The air had a strange quality that made everything seem fresher and cleaner than it should be in such a large enclosed space. "This is incredible," she whispered to Jake. "The biological integration alone is centuries ahead of our best research." The corridors were wide and tall, designed to accommodate beings of many different sizes. They passed other aliens along the way, and Jake noticed that many of them stopped what they were doing to watch the humans pass. Some seemed curious, others seemed nervous, and a few looked almost afraid. "Ambassador Brooks," Zethkri said as they walked, "your species has made remarkable progress in a very short time. Our records show that you achieved interstellar travel only recently." "We're fast learners," Helen replied. "Humanity has always been good at adapting to new challenges." The crystal being's response was strange. "Yes, we have observed this about your species. You are indeed very good at adapting to challenges." They were led to a waiting area with furniture that adjusted itself to fit human bodies. The technology was impressive, but Jake was more interested in the other beings who were waiting there. They all seemed to be keeping their distance from the humans, and several had what looked like guards or escorts with them. "Speaker Zethkri," Helen said, "we're very grateful for this opportunity. Humanity has dreamed of joining a galactic community for generations." The crystal being was quiet for a long moment. "Ambassador Brooks, before we proceed to the council chamber, there are some things about your species that we must discuss. Your people have a very unique history among the intelligent species we have encountered." Dr. Carter and Jake exchanged glances. Something in the alien's tone suggested that this wasn't going to be a simple welcome ceremony. "We've prepared a full cultural exchange package," Helen said. "We're ready to share everything about human civilization and learn about yours." "That will not be necessary," Zethkri replied. "We have been studying your species for some time. We know about your history, your wars, your methods of conflict resolution. It is precisely because of this knowledge that you have been invited here." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The way the alien said wars and conflict resolution didn't sound like academic interest. It sounded like something much more serious. "The council is ready to receive you now," Zethkri continued. "What you learn today will change everything about how your species sees itself and its place in the galaxy." As they were led toward the council chamber, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple diplomatic meeting. The aliens' behavior, their careful study of human history, and their focus on humanity's conflicts all pointed to something that Helen's diplomatic training hadn't prepared them for. The massive doors to the council chamber began to open, revealing a space so large that Jake couldn't see the far end. Thousands of different beings filled the chamber, all of them turning to look at the small group of humans. "Welcome," Zethkri said, "to your new destiny." The council chamber was the largest room Jake Morrison had ever seen. It stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness, and the walls curved away in all directions like the inside of a giant sphere. Thousands of different beings filled the space, arranged in rows that rose up like the seats in an ancient stadium. Every type of alien imaginable was there, from tiny creatures that glowed like fireflies to massive beings that looked like living mountains. Ambassador Helen Brooks walked beside Zethkri toward the center of the chamber, trying to keep her composure, as thousands of alien eyes focused on the small group of humans. The translator device in her ear was working overtime, picking up fragments of conversations in dozens of different languages. "The humans have arrived," she heard one voice say. "They look smaller than I expected," said another. "Are you sure they're the right species?" asked a third. Dr. Lisa Carter was amazed by the diversity of life forms around them. She had studied every piece of information Earth had about alien species, but nothing had prepared her for this. There were beings made of what looked like living gas, floating in transparent bubbles filled with their own atmosphere. Others seemed to be made of metal and crystal, their bodies reflecting the lights of the chamber. Some had faces that were almost human, while others had no faces at all. "This is incredible," she whispered to Jake. "The evolutionary paths represented here must span billions of years." Jake nodded, but he was more interested in the security arrangements. As they walked toward the center of the chamber, he noticed that many of the alien delegates were positioned behind what looked like protective barriers. Energy shields shimmered around some of the seating areas, and he could see armed guards stationed throughout the chamber. "Helen," he said quietly, "look at the security setup here. This doesn't look like a routine diplomatic meeting." Helen had noticed it too. The level of protection was far beyond what would be normal for a peaceful first contact ceremony. It looked more like the kind of security you would use when dealing with a dangerous enemy. Zethkri led them to a raised platform in the center of the chamber. As they climbed the steps, Jake could feel the weight of thousands of stairs following their every move. The silence in the chamber was complete except for the sound of their footsteps. At the top of the platform, Zethkri gestured for Helen to step forward to a speaking position. A series of lights came on, illuminating the humans for all the delegates to see clearly. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Zethkri announced, its crystal voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I present to you the representatives of humanity, a species from the planet Earth in the Sol system." The response was not what Helen had expected. Instead of welcoming applause or friendly greetings, there was only more silence. The aliens watched them with the kind of intense focus that made Helen feel like a specimen in a laboratory. "Thank you, Speaker Zethkri," Helen said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "On behalf of all humanity, I want to express our gratitude for this opportunity to join the galactic community. We come here in peace, seeking friendship and cooperation with all intelligent species." She had practiced this speech hundreds of times, but the words felt strange in the massive chamber. The aliens listened politely, but there was no warmth in their attention. "We bring greetings from Earth," Helen continued, "and we offer our knowledge, our culture, and our friendship to all who would accept it. Humanity has always believed that we are stronger when we work together, and we hope to build lasting partnerships with your civilizations." When she finished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the upper levels, came a sound that the translator couldn't convert into words. Other aliens began making similar sounds, and soon the entire chamber was filled with what sounded like a mix of nervous chatter and worried discussion. An ancient being that looked like a combination of tree and octopus raised several of its arms for attention. The chamber fell silent again. "I am Council Speaker Velfer," the being announced, its voice deep and slow like distant thunder. "I have served this council for over 2,000 years, and I have seen many species take their first steps into the galactic community." The ancient being paused, and Jake got the feeling that it was choosing its words very carefully. "However," Velther continued, "your species presents us with a unique situation. Before we can proceed with the traditional welcome ceremony, we must address certain aspects of your species' history." Helen felt a chill run down her spine. "Our history?" "Yes," Velther replied. "It is customary for new species to share their cultural and technological achievements with the Council. However, in your case, we have already conducted extensive research into your civilization." The chamber began to change around them. The walls became transparent, revealing massive display screens that stretched from floor to ceiling. Images began to appear on the screens, and Helen realized with growing horror that they were all scenes from human history, but these weren't images of human achievements in art, science, or exploration. Every image showed conflict, warfare, and violence. The screens displayed battles from every era of human history, from ancient sword fights to modern space combat. Your species has a remarkable capacity for organized violence, Valther said as the images continued to change. In your brief history, you have engaged in thousands of armed conflicts. Your technological development has been driven primarily by military needs. Dr. Carter watched in fascination and horror as the screen showed detailed analyses of human weapons technology. The aliens had studied everything from the first stone tools used as weapons to the latest military spacecraft. This is not necessarily a criticism, Valther continued. Every species has its own evolutionary path. However, your path has been uniquely focused on the development of combat techniques and weapon systems. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. The aliens hadn't invited humanity to join a peaceful galactic community. They had been studying human military capabilities. Wait, Helen said, her diplomatic training kicking in. These images only show one aspect of human civilization. We have also made incredible advances in medicine, art, philosophy, and science. We have learned to live in peace with each other. Have you? Asked another alien delegate, this one resembling a large, intelligent bird. According to our records, your species is currently engaged in several active military conflicts. Your peaceful space program is largely funded by military organizations. The screens changed again, showing more recent human activities. Military bases, weapons testing, and space-based defense systems filled the displays. The aliens had been watching humanity much more closely than anyone on Earth had realized. This brings us to the reason for your invitation, Valther said. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for nearly 10,000 years through diplomacy, cooperation, and mutual understanding. Our civilizations have evolved beyond the need for violence. Jake was beginning to understand where this was going, and he didn't like it. However, the ancient being continued, we now face a threat that cannot be resolved through peaceful means. For the first time in our history, we require the services of a species that specializes in warfare. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter again. Many of the alien delegates seemed uncomfortable with what their speaker was saying. You're recruiting us, Helen said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Valther replied simply. We need warriors, Ambassador Brooks. And according to our research, your species produces the most effective warriors in the known galaxy. Dr. Carter felt sick. You're not inviting us to join your civilization. You want us to be your army. The situation is more complex than that, Zethkri said, but you are not entirely wrong. We have a problem that requires a military solution, and your species is uniquely qualified to provide that solution. Jake looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces watching them. Now he understood why there were so many security measures, why the other delegates seemed afraid, and why the station had been mostly empty when they arrived. The galaxy's peaceful civilizations had found themselves facing a threat they couldn't handle, and they had decided that humanity's violent history made them the perfect solution to their problem. What kind of threat? Helen asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. That, Valther said, is what we must discuss next. But first, you must understand that what we are about to tell you will change everything about how your species sees itself and its place in the universe. The screens around them went dark, and the chamber fell silent again. Jake could feel the weight of thousands of years of galactic civilization pressing down on them, and he realized that nothing would ever be the same for humanity again. The council chamber emptied quickly after Speaker Valther's announcement. Most of the alien delegates left without saying a word, their faces showing mixtures of fear, worry, and something that looked like guilt. Jake Morrison watched them go, feeling more confused and angry with each passing minute. This way, please, Zethkri said, leading the humans toward a smaller chamber connected to the main hall. General Kicksmith is waiting to brief you on the situation. Ambassador Helen Brooks walked in silence, her mind racing. Everything she had prepared for this mission was useless now. Instead of making first contact with a peaceful civilization, they were apparently being recruited as soldiers for a war she knew nothing about. The briefing room was smaller but still impressive by human standards. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays that showed the galaxy in 3 dimensions. At the center of the room stood a being that was clearly designed for warfare. Even though it belonged to a supposedly peaceful civilization, General Kixmoth was tall and muscular, with 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of metal plates. When it spoke, its voice was deep and carried the authority of someone used to giving orders in dangerous situations. "Humans," the general said without ceremony, "you are here because we are facing the end of everything we have built. Sit down, and I will tell you about the Devourers." Dr. Lisa Carter took a seat at the curved table, her scientific mind already working on the implications of what they were about to hear. The name Devourers didn't sound like something a peaceful civilization would normally have to worry about. 3 years ago, General Kixmoth began, our long-range sensors detected something approaching from outside our galaxy. At first, we thought it was a natural phenomenon, maybe a large asteroid field or a wandering star cluster. The displays around the room changed to show deep space sensor readings. Jake could see the data even though he didn't understand all of it. Something large was definitely moving toward their area of space. But as we gathered more information, we realized we were looking at something much worse. The objects were not natural, they were ships, more ships than we had ever seen in one place, and they were moving with purpose toward our galaxy. The general touched a control, and the displays showed a simulation of what the sensors had detected. Thousands of massive shapes moved through space in perfect formation, each one larger than the biggest space stations the Council had ever built. "We sent long-range probes to get a closer look," the general continued. "What we found was beyond our worst fears. These ships belong to a species we call the Devourers, and they do exactly what their name suggests." Helen felt sick as she watched the simulation show what had happened to the probe. The Devourer ships had surrounded it, broken it apart, and absorbed every piece of material into their own hulls. "The Devourers don't just attack planets or civilizations," General Kixmoth explained. "They consume entire star systems. They strip every planet down to its core, harvest every asteroid, and even drain the energy from stars themselves. When they're finished with a system, there's nothing left but empty space." Dr. Carter leaned forward, her scientist's curiosity overcoming her fear. "How is that possible?" "The energy requirements alone would be enormous." "They've been doing this for millions of years," the general replied. "Every system they consume makes them stronger and gives them more resources to build more ships. They're like a disease that spreads from galaxy to galaxy, leaving nothing alive behind them." The displays changed again, showing the path of destruction the Devourers had left in other galaxies. Jake felt his blood run cold as he saw system after system marked as completely lifeless. "How many civilizations have they destroyed?" Helen asked quietly. "Billions," the general said. "We found records of dozens of galaxies that were once full of life, now completely empty. The Devourers have been moving from galaxy to galaxy for longer than our oldest civilizations have existed." Jake was starting to understand the scope of the threat. "And they're coming here next?" "Yes, based on their current speed and trajectory. They will reach the outer rim of our galaxy in approximately 18 months. Once they begin their consumption process, we estimate that they will reach the core worlds within 5 years. The room fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. Dr. Carter was the first to speak. "What have you tried to do to stop them?" General Kixmoth's expression was grim. "Everything we could think of. We sent diplomatic missions to try to communicate with them. The ships were destroyed before they could even transmit a greeting. We tried to set up defensive barriers around star systems. The Devourers went through them like they weren't there." "What about weapons?" Jake asked. "You must have some kind of military capability. That is the problem," the general said. "For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has maintained peace through diplomacy and cooperation. We have defense systems designed to protect us from pirates and small conflicts, but we have never needed to fight a war on this scale." Helen was beginning to understand. "Your weapons are designed to disable and capture, not to destroy." "Exactly. Our entire military philosophy is based on the principle that every life is valuable and that violence should always be a last resort. We have spent centuries developing technology that can end conflicts without causing permanent harm. The general touched another control, and the displays showed examples of Council military technology. The weapons were impressive, but Jake could see immediately that they were designed for law enforcement, not warfare. Against normal opponents, our approach works perfectly, the general continued. But the devourers cannot be reasoned with, cannot be captured, and cannot be reformed. They exist only to consume. Our defensive weapons are useless against them. Dr. Carter was studying the tactical displays with growing understanding. So you need species that are willing and able to fight a real war. Species that have experience with weapons designed to destroy rather than disable. That is correct. We have been searching for younger civilizations that have not yet evolved beyond the need for warfare. Your species is the most promising candidate we have found. Jake felt a mix of pride and disgust. You're saying we're good at killing. You are good at survival, the general corrected. Your species has faced extinction events before and has always found a way to overcome them. Your wars have taught you to be creative, adaptable, and ruthless when necessary. Helen was trying to process the moral implications of what they were being asked to do. You want us to teach you how to be killers. We want you to teach us how to survive, General Kicksmith replied. The Devourers have never faced an opponent like humanity. They have conquered peaceful civilizations for millions of years, but they have never encountered a species that treats warfare as a science. The displays around the room changed one more time, showing detailed analyses of human military tactics and strategies. The aliens had studied everything from ancient battle formations to modern space combat techniques. Your species has a unique understanding of asymmetric warfare, the general said. You know how to turn an enemy's strength against them. You understand deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare. These are concepts that peaceful civilizations have never needed to develop. Jake was beginning to see the bigger picture. You're not just asking us to fight for you. You're asking us to change your entire civilization. Yes, the general said simply. We are asking you to help us become something we have never been before. We are asking you to help us become warriors. The weight of the decision ahead of them was overwhelming. Helen looked at her companions and saw the same struggle in their faces. They had come here hoping to join a peaceful galactic community, but instead they were being asked to drag that community into the kind of warfare that humanity had spent centuries trying to move beyond. General, Helen said finally, how long? Do we have to decide? The Devourers will be here in 18 months, the general replied. If we are going to have any hope of stopping them, we need to begin preparations immediately. The transformation of our military capabilities will take time, and we cannot afford to wait. Dr. Carter had one more question. What happens if we say no? General Kicksmith was quiet for a long moment. Then trillions of innocent beings will die, and the Devourers will continue their march across the universe. Eventually, they will reach your solar system as well. You can fight them now with allies, or you can face them alone later. The room fell silent again as the humans considered their options. Outside the briefing room, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, waiting for their decision. The conference room aboard the UES Horizon felt smaller than usual. Commander Jake Morrison sat at the head of the table, looking at the faces of his crew as they discussed the most important decision in human history. The weight of what they had learned at the council station pressed down on all of them like a heavy blanket. We can't just ignore what we've seen, Dr. Lisa Carter said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Those displays showed entire galaxies stripped of all life. Billions of civilizations that will never exist again because of the Devourers. How can we even consider saying no? Ambassador Helen Brooks shook her head. It's not that simple, Lisa. If we agree to this, we're not just committing ourselves. We're committing all of humanity to become the galaxy's military force. Future generations will inherit that role whether they want it or not. Captain Alex Turner had been quiet through most of the discussion, but now he spoke up. The general made it clear that the Devourers will eventually reach our solar system anyway. If we don't help now, we'll be facing them alone later, with no allies and no experience fighting them. Engineer Pete Collins looked up from his tablet where he had been reviewing the technical data the aliens had shared. The technology gap is incredible. These Devourer ships are larger than anything we've ever built, and they have millions of years of experience consuming civilizations. Even with all our military knowledge, the odds are terrible. Jake listened to his crew debate, but his mind kept returning to something General Kicksmith had shown them. The simulation of a Devourer attack on a peaceful world. Billions of innocent beings who had never known war, suddenly facing an enemy that gave no mercy and asked for no surrender. "There's something else we need to consider," said Lieutenant Karen Walsh, the ship's communications officer. "I've been monitoring transmissions from across the galaxy since we got back to the ship. The news about the Devourers is spreading, and the reaction is not what I expected." She activated the room's display screen and showed them a series of translated messages from different alien civilizations. "These are volunteer requests," she explained. "Species that have barely achieved space travel are offering to fight alongside us against the Devourers. They know they don't have any military experience, but they're willing to try anyway." Jake read some of the messages on the screen. Young civilizations that had only recently learned to build spaceships were asking how they could help defend the galaxy. Some had never been in a conflict more serious than a trade dispute, but they were ready to face extinction rather than let the Devourers continue their destruction. "This one came from a species called the Velinari," Karen continued, highlighting a particular message. "They've been in space for less than 50 years and they only have 12 ships total, but they're offering all of them to the defense effort." Dr. Carter felt tears forming in her eyes as she read the message. "They're willing to sacrifice themselves for beings they've never even met." "That's what makes this decision so hard," Helen said. "These civilizations are willing to die to protect others. How can we, with all our military experience and knowledge, do any less?" Alex leaned back in his chair, looking frustrated. "But that's exactly the problem. If we agree to this, we're not just helping them defend themselves. We're teaching an entire galaxy how to wage war. We're spreading the kind of violence that humanity has been trying to move beyond." Jake understood Alex's concern. Humanity had spent generations learning to resolve conflicts peacefully. The idea of teaching other species to fight went against everything they had worked toward as a civilization. "Maybe that's not entirely bad," Pete said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I mean, we've learned how to fight, but we've also learned when not to fight. We understand the cost of war better than anyone." "Maybe that's what the galaxy needs right now," Helen considered this. "You're saying we could teach them not just how to fight, but also how to make peace." "Exactly. The Council has spent 10,000 years avoiding conflict altogether. They've never had to learn the balance between war and peace. We have." Dr. Carter was studying the data about the Devourers again. "There's another factor we haven't discussed. According to this information, the Devourers have never faced organized resistance before. Every civilization they've encountered has either tried to run away or hide. None of them have ever fought back effectively." Jake saw where she was going. "With this, you think we might actually have a chance?" "I think we might be the first species in millions of years that's capable of surprising them. They've developed their tactics based on fighting peaceful civilizations. They've never had to deal with an enemy that fights dirty." Karen pulled up another set of communications. "There's something else. I've been analyzing the patterns in Devourer attacks based on the historical data the Council provided. They always attack in the same way, using the same strategies. They've never had to adapt because their enemies were always the same type of peaceful civilization." Alex was beginning to see the tactical possibilities. "If we could force them to change their approach, make them adapt to new types of resistance, we might be able to slow them down or even stop them," Jake finished. "But only if we can convince the peaceful species to fight in ways they've never imagined. The discussion was interrupted by an incoming communication from the council station. Zethkri's crystal face appeared on the screen, looking as worried as an alien made of living rock could look. Commander Morrison, I apologize for the interruption. But there has been a development? We have received new sensor data about the Devourer fleet. Jake felt his stomach drop. What kind of development? They are moving faster than we originally calculated. Our new estimate is that they will reach the Outer Rim systems in 14 months, not 18. The room fell silent. 4 months might not seem like much, but when preparing an entire galaxy for war, every day mattered. There is something else, Zethkri continued. We have detected scout ships separating from the main fleet. They appear to be moving ahead to survey potential targets. Dr. Carter leaned forward. How long until the scouts arrive? Approximately 6 months. Helen felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Speaker Zethkri, how quickly do you need our answer? The Council is meeting an emergency session tonight. If humanity agrees to help us, we need to begin preparations immediately. Every day we delay makes our chances of success smaller. After Zethkri ended the communication, the room remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Jake spoke. I think we all know what we have to do. The question is whether we can live with the consequences, Alex nodded slowly. Those young civilizations willing to sacrifice themselves for strangers they've never met. If they can do that, how can we refuse to help? It's not just about helping them, Helen said. It's about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. Do we want to be part of a community that protects the innocent, or do we want to be the species that stood by and watched while trillions died? Dr. Carter was looking at the messages from volunteer species again. These beings are offering to die for the chance to save others. We're offering to teach them how to live. Pete had been quiet during the final discussion, but now he spoke. Up. We've spent our entire history learning how to survive impossible situations. Maybe it's time to teach that skill to others. Jake looked around the table at his crew. They were scared, but they were also determined. They understood the cost of what they were agreeing to do, but they also understood the cost of refusing. All right, he said finally. Let's vote. Oh. In favor of accepting the Council's request? Every hand in the room went up. Jake activated the communication system. Get me Speaker Zethkri. Tell the Council that humanity accepts their offer, will help them prepare for war. As he spoke those words, Jake knew that nothing would ever be the same for humanity or for the galaxy. They were about to change the course of galactic civilization, and there would be no going back. 6 months had passed since humanity accepted the Council's desperate request, and the galaxy had become a place that none of its peaceful inhabitants would have recognized. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Fortress Station, watching the largest display screen he had ever seen. It showed the outer edge of Council space, where the first Devourer scout ships were expected to arrive any day now. The space around him was filled with activity that would have been impossible just months ago. Aliens from hundreds of different species worked side by side with human military advisors, learning tactics and strategies that their civilizations had never needed before. The sounds of different languages mixed together as officers coordinated the largest defensive operation. In galactic history, Dr. Lisa Carter had been assigned to the Biological Warfare Division, a department that hadn't existed until humans arrived. She was working with alien scientists to find ways to disrupt the Devourer's biological processes, using principles that the Council's peaceful researchers had never explored. The work was difficult and often disturbing, but it might be their only chance to find a weakness in their seemingly unstoppable enemy. Admiral Morrison, called Captain Alex Turner from his position at the tactical station. We're receiving reports from the sensor network. 3 objects just dropped out of hyperspace near the Kepler system. Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The first real test of whether everything they had taught the galaxy's defenders would actually work against the Devourers. Size and configuration? He asked. Large, sir. Each ship is approximately 15 kilometers long. They matched the profile of Devourer scout vessels from the historical data. Ambassador Helen Brooks, who now served as the liaison between human forces and the Council, joined them at the command station. "Are our forces in position?" "Yes," Alex replied. "The mixed fleet is holding at the edge of the system, just like we planned. Human tactics, Council technology, and volunteers from 47 different species." Jake activated the communication system that connected him to every ship in the defensive fleet. "All units, this is Admiral Morrison. You know what you're fighting for today. Remember your training, trust your allies, and show these invaders that this galaxy will not go quietly into the darkness." The display screen changed to show the tactical situation in the Kepler system. The three Devourer ships were moving toward the inhabited planets with the same methodical approach they had used for millions of years. They had no reason to expect anything different from this encounter. Captain Ben Davis, commanding the mixed species ship Unity, reported from the front lines. "Admiral, the Devourers are beginning their standard approach pattern. They're ignoring our presence completely." That was exactly what the humans had hoped for. The Devourers were so confident in their superiority that they didn't even consider other ships to be threats. They had never faced organized resistance before. "All units, execute Operation Surprise," Jake ordered. What happened next had never occurred in the millions of years of Devourer expansion. Instead of running away or trying to negotiate, the defending fleet attacked using tactics the invaders had never encountered. The Council ships, equipped with weapons modified using human military principles, struck from multiple directions at once. They used the Devourer's size against them, targeting specific systems instead of trying to destroy the massive ships all at once. Meanwhile, smaller human vessels used hit-and-run tactics, striking and disappearing before the Devourers could respond. Most importantly, they fought dirty. The peaceful species had learned from humanity's long history of asymmetric warfare. They used deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare techniques that the Devourers had never seen before. Dr. Carter watched the biological warfare components of the attack with nervous excitement. "The disruption agents are working. Look at the energy readings from the lead Devourer ship." The massive vessel was showing signs of system failures as the specially designed biological agents interfered with the organic components of its technology. The Devourers had built their ships using a combination of technology and biology that they had never had to defend against attacks targeting both simultaneously. "They're trying to adapt," reported Lieutenant Karen Walsh from the communications station. "The Devourer ships are changing their formation and activating defensive systems we haven't seen before." Jake felt a moment of pride mixed with worry. The Devourers were being forced to adapt for the first time in their existence, which meant the galaxy's defenders were succeeding. But it also meant the enemy was more dangerous than they had hoped. The battle lasted 4 hours, longer than any engagement the Devourers had fought in recorded history. When it was over, one of the 3 scout ships had been completely destroyed. Another was badly damaged and retreating, and the third had been captured intact. The celebration across the galactic communication networks was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in millions of years, someone had fought the Devourers and won. "Admiral," Alex said, his voice filled with amazement, "we're receiving congratulations from across the galaxy. Species that have never communicated with each other before are sending messages of support." Helen was reading the diplomatic reports with tears in her eyes. "The psychological impact is incredible. Civilizations that were preparing to evacuate or hide are now asking how they can join the defense effort." But Jake knew that this was only the beginning. "Get me General Kixmoth and the Council leadership. We need to prepare for what comes next." The captured Devourer ship provided intelligence that was both encouraging and terrifying. Dr. Carter's team discovered that the Devourers were not the unstoppable force they had seemed to be. They had weaknesses just like any other species, but they also learned that the main fleet was much larger than anyone had imagined. The scout ships were transmitting data back to the main fleet until the moment we jammed their communications, Dr. Carter reported. "The Devourers now know that this galaxy is defended by something they've never encountered before. General Kicksmith's expression was grim. Will they change their approach? Almost certainly, Jake replied. But that might actually work in our favor. For millions of years, they've used the same tactics because they always worked. Now they have to develop new strategies, and that will slow them down. Over the following weeks, the galaxy continued to transform. Species that had been pacifist for thousands of years were learning to build weapons and train soldiers. Young civilizations that had never been in a serious conflict were becoming the backbone of the defense fleet. Engineer Pete Collins was working around the clock to help integrate human military technology with alien systems. The combination is incredible, he told Jake during one of their brief meetings. Human tactics with council technology and alien innovation. We're creating something that's never existed before. The most surprising development came from the younger species that had volunteered to fight. They brought an enthusiasm and creativity to warfare that even the humans found impressive. They had no preconceived ideas about how battles should be fought, so they were willing to try tactics that more experienced species would never consider. They're natural guerrilla fighters, Captain Davis reported after a training exercise. The Zephyrians have developed a technique for hiding entire fleets inside asteroid fields. The Corvani figured out how to turn cargo ships into mobile weapon platforms. They're thinking outside every box we have. As news of the first victory spread, Jake found himself thinking about what this meant for the future. Humanity had come to the stars hoping to leave their violent past behind, but instead they had become teachers of war to an entire galaxy. But maybe, he thought, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The violence they were teaching came with hard-earned wisdom about its costs and limitations. The galaxy's new warriors were learning not just how to fight, but also why fighting was sometimes necessary, and when it should end, the main Devourer fleet was still approaching, and the battles ahead would be harder than anything the galaxy had ever faced. But for the first time in millions of years, the Devourers were facing an enemy that could adapt, innovate, and fight back. The day humanity reached the Galactic Council, war had indeed echoed in their wake. But that echo was the sound of freedom being born, carried by voices from across the galaxy who had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to fight for it. In the depths of space, thousands of ships bearing the insignia of hundreds of different worlds prepared for the war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. And at their head, carrying the lessons of every conflict humanity had ever fought, flew vessels crewed by beings who had learned that the greatest strength was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction was the only way to protect what mattered most.